Hey guys, it's Nathan here from Cockpit Coaches, and I'm here with Adam Erhart. Adam, welcome.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, and Adam is one of us. He was formerly a pilot. Adam, why don't you give the guys just a quick 30-second summary of your flying career and how where you decided to progress from there?
Right on. Yeah. So I started flying when I was 17. So basically still in high school, went through the whole flight school thing, went up north to the Arctic, did the whole like ice pilots thing of loading bags and trying to swamp on different like Twin Otters and DC-3s and just worked my bag off. And then from there ended up getting sort of the dream job and ended up flying business jets. So I was flying Challenger 604, 605, or pardon me, 300, CJ3, and basically was working out of Europe. Did that was supposed to only do it for like 2 years, 3 years maybe, because it was like, the dream job, but also they own you.
Yeah, right.
But because it's those golden handcuffs and because it was so good, I ended up staying there for like 7 years until finally, everything just sort of came to a head and I was like, I got to get out of here. And this is not for me and I have to leave. And so I essentially, I don't know, you could call it a decision to exit, or you could call it a nervous breakdown. That's like, I could just never do this again. And so I left completely. I just gave it up right there on the spot, called my co-pilot in and was like, dude, I got to go. And he's like, yeah, dude, we know you got to go. And so I called my chief pilot and I was like, dude, I got to go. And he's like, yeah, man, we know you got to go. So that was it. And that's the history of my entire flying career.
Wow, that's cool. A lot of the guys that are watching, they're in a position where they don't have a choice. They're out of flying,
Yeah.
they've lost a job or whatever. You and I are lucky we made the choice. But what was the thing that helped you get over the edge or get over the fear of even getting out of flying in the first place?
Yeah. So for starters, it was a terrifying decision that everyone thought I was insane for making.
Right.
Insane.
Yeah.
No one more so. I don't know if she'll admit this, but probably no one more so than my mother-in-law, who was like so proud of introducing her son-in-law as like the business jet captain who flew all over the world. And now it's like, well, what are you going to do? And I was like, I don't know. So I think the big thing is knowing that two things. Number one is that it was terrifying for sure. Like it was absolutely a scary moment. However, the fact of being a pilot, the attitude, the training, the skills, the ability to overcome challenges, to work through experts. Literally, it's like I don't know if there's a better profession designed to like, all right, here is an uncertain situation that you have no idea how to deal with. By the way, it's 100% on you. Go figure it out. And so it was like, all right, cool. We're just going to look at everything that I've accomplished up till now. Why can't I do something else? And so there was absolutely self-doubt, and I didn't believe that for a long, long period of time. But in the end, yeah, that's definitely how it worked out.
Yeah, you touched on something interesting, which is this identity that we all have. And a lot of the guys are struggling right now because they don't have a job, for whatever reason. So all of a sudden, they were a pilot and now they weren't a pilot. Like you said, they can't introduce themselves as, oh, I fly the, 777 for this airline or blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And so it sort of poses this question like, well, oh, who am I if I'm not a pilot? Or who am I if I don't earn this income or I don't?
Yes.
So you kind of touched on that, but how did you work through that? Was that tough for you?
It was tough, right? It was tricky because first of all, there was the income, right? Which was like this huge thing. So my initial goal was like, if I could just get to that income again, that'll be my only goal. Like if I could just hit it.
Yeah.
And so I thought about it. I journaled on. I did all of the self-development stuff, and it took. It probably took longer than I wanted, but less than it should have to basically replace that income. So that was fantastic. But the identity, it took longer, but less so for me and more so because society still wanted to put me in that bucket.
Right.
So what would happen is I would introduce myself, especially early on in my career, my new career, and I was just getting traction there. So I was like, still kind of uncertain and wasn't really sure how to position myself and what to talk about. But I had all of this amazing experience of like, I would fly in and out of London and Paris and Cairo and Dubai and all these things. So everybody kept being like, yeah, that's great about that. Tell me about the pilot stuff. So it's like I wanted to leave, and I wanted to leave that part of me behind, but it was simply too intriguing to everybody else. So it kept dragging me in, which probably delayed my progression a little bit. On the other hand, there was sort of a shift where I was able to be like, all right, I used to be a pilot, but now this part, my future, is so much brighter than it ever was as a pilot. Like, I think the thing is that when you're a pilot, life's amazing. It's really good. Like there's some cool stuff, but there's also some bad stuff. And if you think about all of the downsides of it and things you may change or may replace, depending on if you're someone that thrives with rituals and routines and things like that I always was, and those were always gone as a pilot. You just, hey, you're flying. All right, I guess I'm flying. So it's like all of these new areas that you could look forward to and really build up and start to create a life that you actually want rather than one that you are sort of you've lived for a long time.
Yeah, that's right. You touched on a couple of things there. Like I would introduce myself as a pilot like for about 6 months afterwards. It just was a habit. And I kind of, my new career as a coach, it's like, well, what do? I sit on the phone and talk to people. I don't really have any stories about that, right? I sit in front of my laptop like this and talk to people. I find it interesting, but it doesn't generate a lot of stories. So I really resonate with that. And the second thing, but before we dive too far into it, give us a quick rundown of what you do now. So what did you actually choose to do? Because I love this idea. We're going to talk about freedom and creating your own life, but what do you do now?
So now I am a digital marketing strategist. So what I do is I do digital marketing consulting, training. I teach other people how to do online marketing. And it was not a natural evolution. So how I got into it was I quit flying and I went home and I sat down and I was like, and my wife, who had went through some marketing, was like, you know what, you'd be really good at marketing. And I was like, that's cool. I have no idea what that is or what it even means, like legitimately, which is horrible to admit. But so I started
there's a bunch of pilots watching now that all the stuff you just said you do, they're like, I have no idea.
Exactly, which was me like a decade ago. It was like, I don't even know what this stuff is. And so I started to peel back the layers and I started to get interested and I started to learn more. And as I learned more, my curiosity grew and I learned more and more and more. And I started to really dive in. And I don't know if it was just because of the position that I was in at the time or if it was just my natural skills and inclinations, but I got hooked. Like, I mean, I fell absolutely in love with this. So I started putting in like 12-hour days, 7 days a week. I did it for years to build this thing up. And I should say it just took off, but the reality is I put in just an inordinate amount of time, but it was fun. And so I'm happier now than I ever have been by a long shot. Like, it's not even close. And I would have never found that had all of that not happened, because there's no way I'd have been like, I should leave flying to do this weird digital marketing stuff, which nobody even understands. So
yeah, that's right. It's like, you took the leap without knowing what you're doing. So you're very similar to a lot of the guys now, which have taken a leap with out of their control and they don't know what they're going to do. But what I'm hearing from you is you kind of just went in and went, right, what am I good at? What do I do? You ask people to support you. And then you found a little bit of curiosity in something. And instead of going, oh, I'm not a marketer, I'm just a pilot, I don't know what I'm doing, but I wish I could, you kind of just learned about it one thing at a time and was, I guess, okay being shitty at something or okay learning something or
totally.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So what happened is when I first started, and I was like, I'm going to get into marketing of all things, which is random. The problem with doing marketing is that your competition is other marketers who are typically really good at what they do. So it's a tricky field to get into. But I had this goal of like, if I could just become the number 2 or the number 3 marketer in my small town and I could just replace my income, life would be grand. And then I started to realize that all of the skills that had made me successful as a pilot, mainly the accountability. I think that's probably the biggest thing. It's like, this is all on me. So everything, like if the plane crashes and we all die, that's my fault. Like if the business fails and my family doesn't eat, that's my fault. So it was really kind of an easy switch for me to just be like, all right, this is all on. So I really dove in. And what I realized is that people outside of industries like, say, aviation, they don't have that. Like, they weren't put through the ringer. They didn't have to work those crazy hours. They didn't have to push the envelope. They didn't have to be on life and death situations. So I was equipped to handle things that they never could. So my competition would call me a year later and they'd be like, how are you doing this? How are you putting out so much content? How are you building this business so quickly? And my accountant would have conversations. He'd be like, dude, how are you here? And everyone else is over there. And like, we were just skyrocketing. And I was like, I'm just grinding. Like, I'm working really hard and I'm studying and I'm learning and I'm applying everything that I've learned and how to interface with other people and how to handle difficult situations and how to deal with customers and clients. So there was so much overlap that I didn't give credit for. And I think that's a big thing, is you have to try to understand that when you leave aviation, you have all these hours and like people give zero, like they do not care how many hours you have. There is no transference, but the accountability and the authority and the education, like, oh man, it's huge. It's huge. The ability to carry yourself with confidence, not arrogance, but confidence in these situations. Yeah. Confidence is what closes deals. So there's some powerful skills.
Yeah, it's like what I'm sort of teaching the guys, and we're teaching in the course a lot, is that if you have an engine fire, most of you won't freak out, right? You don't go, oh, why me? Like, why is this happening to me?
Yeah.
You're like,
Yeah.
pilots, we don't go into victim mode. Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We naturally, we go, right, there's a problem. We see it.
Yeah.
I'm trained for this. I'm not going to panic. I'm going to work through it. I can do this. And so realizing that can transfer into anything, right? Like in business, obviously there's fires to put out all the time. Uh,
Totally.
we don't necessarily have a checklist with it, but we are kind of trained to handle situations that are out of the ordinary, that would be kind of overwhelming to a lot of people. We have systems to kind of prioritize and work through those things.
Totally. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Is there anything else that you learned as a pilot that has kind of transferred into your new role?
So I don't know where most of the guys are, if they're airlines or they're
Mostly airlines,
corporate, mostly airlines.
Yeah.
So I think so in corporate, what was neat is that it was working with a lot of billionaires and millionaires and realizing that they're just normal people,
right,
and how to interface with them. So that was helpful. Had it been in, say, the airlines and that, which is, I grew up in an airline family. My dad was an airline pilot, sort of how I naturally came into the business. There, I would say the biggest skills, because I worked somewhat in airlines, mostly in kind of sketchy northern ones we shall not mention. But the reality is there you learn a tremendous amount about managing people, about managing expectations, about taking responsibility even for things that are not your fault and apologizing for them anyways. So I think there's skills everywhere that transfer over.
Awesome. And you touched on something about, for me, I didn't realize how much the airline had controlled my life. And I'd been an airline pilot since I was 22. I joined the first airline. And so you just knew, okay, you have a roster, you apply for annual leave, a year in advance or whatever. That's just how it is. And when I left, I was like, oh gosh, I can't believe I handed over 90% of my life to a company. Odd thing in hindsight. And you kind of touched on it. And the interesting thing you said is like you were working 12-hour days. So it's not like you were working any less. What was the difference?
Oh, it's like, so to me, with corporate, probably very similar to airlines, what ends up happening is it's like we got a tremendous amount of time off. So we would do month on, month off. So it'd be amazing. And you'd be like, you get a month off? I'd be like, yes, but they've got your number and you're expected to answer. And if your rotation, the guy you're with, he gets sick or whatever, it's like you're going back. So you're never really ever off completely. Right. And when you're on, you're always on. So it's like we would have long stretches, but they would always call. So you definitely, I had this feeling, always this like pit in the, like this feeling in the pit of my stomach. I was like, I just don't like this. So what happened is when that went away, it was like this freedom and this relief. And now where I'm at is I'm probably unemployable. It's like if I ever had to go back, no, I could never go back, because I know what it's like now to have control of what I'm going to do and how I'm going to do it. Also, what ends up happening is that aviation tends to attract a lot of type A, like a lot of like really driven, achieving people. What happens when you put people like us in a company that is controlled 90% of our time, we'll do what they say and so on and so forth. But if you set us free and you let us and be like, look, this is all on you, oh man, you can crush it. So for me, 12 hours a day, I'd have worked 14 or 16 on days I did, because I knew what I was capable of and I enjoyed it. And everything that I did, unlike flying where you're going to get some hours and you can fly more, I guess, to a certain extent, but by trying a little harder, you're not rewarded. Well, outside, you try harder, you are rewarded in direct proportion to the amount of effort that you put in. So I kind of cracked the code. I was like, wait a second, I just work way harder and I get way more stuff. I was like, and nobody tells me what to do, and I'm going to make sure that they never can again by putting in the effort now. So yeah, it was a bit of a swing at first, but yeah, not one I regret.
Yeah, so that's a good one. Let's move on to some of the negatives about being a pilot. And you touched on one there, and I think it's like because of certainly in the airline industry, a lot of the companies, a lot of the pilots are unionized. So we do kind of get into that habit of like us versus them with the company.
Yeah.
Maybe not wanting to do anything over and above what the contract
right.
says. So that can be a bit of a habit of like not wanting to work too hard, not wanting to put too much effort in. But like you said, if you can get out of that habit in the business world or whatever really you take on outside of flying, you will be rewarded for the more effort that you put in. It goes directly to you.
Yes, 100%, which is dangerous, because where I was at, I had a mentor when I was flying, and he was like, wasting your time, man. He's like, you've got downtime and you're spending it playing pool and throwing darts, and it's like, you should be studying and reading. I was like, yeah. yeah, that's cool. Man, if I could go back in time, it's like, oh, how much more successful I could have been. But they say youth is wasted on the young, right? So it's like all of that time that was spent because there was no real incentive to just do more, which means that the person that I am now today, talking with you, is unrecognizable to who I was a decade ago. Unrecognizable. Like we're not even close to the same people. And I'd like to think in the best way possible. So all of these habits and all of these attitudes and behaviors that I had built, many were good, many were not. And now sort of the evolution from that has been just so profoundly valuable. Yeah, I could never go back.
What were some of the negatives? Just like some of the guys going into this or wanting to start a new business or look for something else. What are some of the things you got to watch out for? Like
like when you're transitioning out of aviation.
Yeah, if you're in that sort of pilot mentality still.
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing by far is, well, first of all, the biggest negative is fear. It's terrifying. All right. Like you're basically trading your career and your life and your identity, everything that makes up who you are. And you just got to flush it, which is horrible. The flip side of that, of course, is that everything that got you there, you can apply those and you can have success in other fields. So it exists. People do transition. The other negative is that a lot of the mentalities of like, here's the procedure, here's the routine, here's the checklist, unless you're going into another field, similar, say medicine or something like that, like the real world doesn't typically have as many SOPs and checklists and things like that. They should, and sometimes we build them and whatnot, but it's like, nah, you're kind of winging it. So a lot of puns in here, bad pilot puns. What am I doing? But it's like, there's a lot of these opportunities for uncertainty. And it's like, it's kind of always like flying into a new airport and you don't really have the charts or the maps. You don't really know the weather. And you just got to be like, I'm just going to trust my gut and I'm going to do what I can. And I think the only other one is that if you approach the transition with the same attitude of like, I'm just going to try to skate by or get by or whatever it is, you will get crushed. And the reason is because the world it's very competitive. The beauty is you don't have to be the best of the best. You just really have to try a little bit harder than everybody else, because the reality is people really aren't trying that hard. So it's kind of yours for the taking if you want it.
Yeah, those are really good points. Yeah, a lot of I think a lot of guys they're in that lifestyle of, you know, when they're at home, it's the downtime and sort of like a little bit more relaxed. And you know, if you combine the two things you said, right, which is like, okay, so we're not used to dealing with uncertainty, we're not used to dealing with risk, you know, we're professional risk mitigators really as pilots. And so when you're in this period now of uncertainty, you've got to find a way to embrace that. Like everything in your body will be saying, freaking out, like this is wrong, we shouldn't be doing this is unsafe, we've lost our security. Those are all just old signals. You have to be able to just be with all of that, be with all that stress and feeling of this is risky. And then work, right? Like whatever you got to do, it's not going to come to you if you just try and glide through. I love that advice, right? If you're just going to try and glide through and hopefully an airline comes and picks you up at some point in the future, that you're going to get crushed. I mean,
and I think Nathan, you hit a really good point as well about risk mitigation and all that. What happens when you leave aviation and you're feeling the risks and you're feeling the uncertainties, you're not going to die. It's like, that's the difference. It's like when you're flying and that engine fire goes off or whatnot, we could talk stories for days, right? But it's like when stuff hits the fan, you might die. Like, let's be honest, there's a very real life and death situation. On the other hand, you get out and someone yells at you or says you're doing a bad job or insults you. It's like,
criticize you.
You're fine. It's like, you're going to be okay. You get to do this again tomorrow. So it's like, we've got a long road ahead. And nothing like that is going to kill you. So
especially in marketing, right? Like marketing in particular, you guys are probably throwing 100 different things at the wall, not knowing which one's going to stick, right? You're not over analyzing and trying to get it perfect and trying to understand which campaign is going to work. I'm sure you're just like going, let's try a bunch of different things. Some are going to fail and they're not going to kill anyone if my marketing campaign fails.
Exactly. Because they fail all the time. It's like, and we never know. And so you do build up that tolerance and you can transfer a bit, but you're gonna be okay.
Good advice. Adam, thanks for coming on. It's very inspiring. And
pleasure.
It's cool for these guys to see someone that's not only exited, but is also thriving and is really living, you know, a better life than they had as a pilot. Is there any little wisdom nugget you want to leave these guys, you know, that are maybe struggling at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, I think just take it one day at a time. That's a real big thing. And then also make sure to give yourself credit for everything that you've done up till now. But the past doesn't equal the future. So what you've done doesn't mean that you have to do that for the rest of your life. You can transition, you can change. Oh man, it's just, It's hard for me to say, because I know that when I remember being in that position and being just so scared and so angry and not sure, but I wish someone would have said, hey dude, it's going to be okay. And in fact, it's going to be so much better as long as you put in the work, as long as you stay curious, as long as you work on helping other people and growing yourself, it's going to be so much better. And it really is. There's no way I could ever go back. It's just infinitely better now. So awesome. Yeah, that's it.
Great advice. Thanks, man. And thanks for giving us your time. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Good talking with you.